Are Puerto Rican Taíno indigenous population still alive? For this video, we will answer with utmost world-class precision. Are Taíno of Puerto Rico still alive? The short answer is yes, and to a smaller degree, no. What do people think and say? People think and say that we are a mix of the three races, and others say we are just Spanish with African heritage. It is noteworthy to add that Puerto Ricans will say that we are a mix of the three races, but not actually believing the reality that it actually is. So therefore, what does this mean? And what's the best short-long answer? It's just a tad bit more complex and simple than people commonly perceive the fact. Some reasons for this lack of true understanding may have originated from many challenges our Puerto Rican culture has faced throughout the centuries. Other misconceptions, such as suggesting we are mainly Spanish with some mulatto, is also simply not our entire truth. Genetics are measured by a few things. A study that will identify the genes accounted for. Are the genes present or are they not? Then there's the phenotype versus the genotype. How much does our genes match our physical appearance? Then there's ancestry versus lineage. Ancestry will be the autosomal DNA, which is the service we are getting from DNA companies to determine the ethnic admixture. However, autosomal DNA does not provide a lineage, while the lineage, which is also present in autosomal DNA results, is the definition of identifying the ethnic origin of said ethnicities harborer through the sex genes. Mitochondria, which is the mother inherited DNA, and only the female gender carries a mitochondria. And the Y chromosome, which is the father inherited lineage per se. Both these elements are half of an individual's DNA. So the scientific term for the genetic lineage or genetic group is haplogroups, because it's half your DNA. While autosomal DNA is your ethnic components that might not even go as far back as 300 to 500 years, it's read like this example. Clusters of alleles and mutations that suggest ethnic background provided by the enlisting of nations in the form of France, Spain, Senegal, Ghana, and Italy. With this service, we are able to tell what is your highest to lowest ethnicity result, while the lineage is read by the haplogroup or haplotype through a naming system, and it's the two genetic components that determine your direct ethno-racial lineage no matter how back you go into time. Something like our last name system, where in Hispanic cultures both father and mother maiden names are provided, but more accurate. With this example, we can determine autosomally that this person is from places in Europe and places in sub-Saharan Africa. But lineage would be different. Even having notable African ancestry, this person can still very well have their haplotypes that are mainly found in Europe. For instance, French male inherited haplotype is mainly R1b, and we can just say this person's mother's mitochondria is H, which is Caucasian female haplogroup. Thus, the autosomal sample provided counts with the ancestries from Europe and Africa, while the lineages are totally of European descent. But that's not all. As I've mentioned, the mitochondria or mtDNA of this sample being H that finds its origins around the Caucasus region, H is a mtDNA haplotype that is present in great numbers in countries like Spain and Portugal. Thus, we may also provide the origins for the male inherited DNA of this person, just as we did with the female. R1b is a haplotype that has its origins among ancient Mongolic populations stemming from Northeast Asia, who are half of the autosomal foundation of Caucasus pastoralist, otherwise known as the Yamnaya and the Kurgan hypothesis. The scientific truth is Europe's male native lineage was displaced by an East Asian male lineage, and the female lineage is considered more onto the native side of Europe. This goes back to Puerto Ricans, and the question, are Taíno still alive? Taíno, Africans, and Europeans mixed in various levels, and for a great majority a balance between the three races was the Boricua DNA. But the ending Canarian immigration made the European and African components perhaps 30% more from their side into the Puerto Rican gene for the mixed populations. As it's clear, there are towns in Puerto Rico that are broadly European. Towns like these that may only harbor a rate of 3% indigenous, and maybe a family or a few of them with some stronger indigenous ancestry. For some towns, indigenous ancestry can be as high as 15%. And then for other towns, indigenous ancestry can very well range between 20 and even as high as 30%. In this channel, we've probably seen thousands of autosomal DNA results by now. Therefore, my estimation for these results are quite accurate. The higher levels of indigenous ancestry, such as 30%, can be notable physically, just as barely notable. This ranges of Taíno in the island is peoples that are mestizo or close, to peoples that might even still be close to pure Taíno in places like El Barrio de la Indiera, which one Boricua there was tested as high as 98% Taíno. Therefore, saying there's no Taíno in the island is also refusing to acknowledge Europeans and Africans. Sure, we are Puerto Ricans, we are our own people and nation upon 1493. The difference is, Taíno of Puerto Rico don't exist in other places other than mixed within Puerto Rico. And that Spaniards and Africans do exist in their countries of origin broadly unmixed within this understood statement. But we are able to see Taíno in the genes and faces of all sorts of Puerto Ricans and their demographic eventualities. That even with all the immigrations that have occurred, we Taíno still fight to survive, very present within the Puerto Rican DNA. So what died was aspects of Taíno culture and traditions. Their language was integrated with the Spanish dialect we speak. In some pockets of the island, the language still lived on, such as Europeans with indigenous ancestry or not will call themselves Jíbaro when the person is a mountain folk, and the general term for Puerto Ricans is Boricua, which is also the name Taíno will call themselves, who are natives to the island of Puerto Rico, otherwise known as the island of Boriquén. But what definitely totally died was 99% of Taíno men in regards to lineage, who were displaced by the R1b carrying Europeans of Southern Europe. African versus indigenous ancestry within Puerto Rico can be very similar at times. Example, one is 22 and the other 18 for instance, or vice versa. This situation would even make it harder to understand the lineage of just reading it autosomally. By using your web browser, search about the recent study done on Puerto Rican DNA, which is a research done on the Puerto Rican mitochondria, therefore, their mother's lineage, from mother to daughter. The study may explain why Puerto Ricans have Taíno recessive traits and would have backlashes of the Taíno heritage, ironically still in denial, and would confirm many facts from history. That 60 to 65% of Puerto Ricans' female haplogroup, this including men and women, is of the C subhaplotypes of mtDNA, which concludes to be an indigenous Taíno-derived haplogroup that is also found in pre-contact indigenous women found in excavations. This is the lineage of indigenous women, whose daughters had daughters, whose daughters had daughters, whose descendants are you and me today, Puerto Ricans or Boricua. This means many people who are Puerto Rican and celebrate their other autosomal ethnicities unknowingly carry the main female Puerto Rican Taíno lineage, haplogroup C. And other female lineages that are native to Europe and Africa are only at a rate of 40 to 35% in regards to the 65% Taíno lineage counterparts, while Europe's lineage is only half East Asian in origin. The Puerto Rican lineages of the majority are both of East Asian origin, Y chromosome haplotype R1b, and from the mother side, mtDNA haplotype C, which are both of East Asian origin. There is different peoples in Puerto Rico and even different ideals and ways of thinking, but Puerto Rico is still partially a Native American, Native Caribbean indigenous population, even if it doesn't apply to all Puerto Ricans. Due to the science, the burden of proof is on those who say Taíno died or went extinct. Depending on where you go, Puerto Ricans are different levels of Taíno, African, and European ancestry, Canadian immigration to Puerto Rico. It is estimated the population was broadly around 60% to 40% high Taíno in ancestry. In contrast to the modern era where Puerto Ricans exhibit Taíno ancestry from 11% to 33% on average. We are Taíno. Taíno Wakiacá. Yo soy Taíno. Taíno de acá. Like, share, and subscribe. This is Abaqueto Neborique, and I'll see you on the next video.